legalization would be good for Colombia?
Drug legalization would be pretty good for Colombia, actually, because it would create less violence. The people that are most affected by violence are the poor people, and in that case, it's 20 million people in our country. Drugs are the ones that create more violence and kill people, and they are affected because of that. So if we actually legalize drugs, then we would be doing them a favor, and violence would reduce in a huge amount.
Yes, but we Colombians have a history of being involved with drugs and having a bad reputation with them. Wouldn't you think it would be bad to give a country that has a bad reputation with drugs and that?
But I mean, the reputation will be there forever. I mean, we are actually worrying about our country and the good for it, not the reputation it will have.
Yes, but the people, you have to think about the people. What about that addiction that may emerge out of these drugs?
Well,
they call drugs of abuse for a reason.
Yes, they're called drugs of abuse, but we can also think about the violence we live in and all the mafia and all the black market there is because of drugs and the cartels and people and all the drug dealers there are and the riches they have. So let's say if we actually legalize drugs, then all of those things will be over. There will be no illegal trafficking, and drugs will actually be reduced of price, and it will not be a profitable business. It would be like alcohol and tobacco, like when it was legalized. Everything, because it was legalized, all of the mafia there was and all of the conflicts there were disappeared, and because of that, like now it's not a huge problem. There's not violence because of it. So
yes, but you need to think about this. Recently, the like kids or teenagers have been involved with drugs of abuse such as alcohol, but they hadn't gone to drugs such as cocaine or marijuana because
exactly. So they wouldn't be a problem if we legalize them.
Hear me out. If you legalize them, drug dealers will be more easier to spot. They would be like in the streets, like.
But we can educate kids and we can teach them that drugs are bad, and even though they're legal, it's because we're doing it so that violence reduces and so that we can stop the mafia that exists today, and we can educate them and tell them like it's wrong for you because it obviously is.
Yes, but we have been trying to do that since Pablo Escobar, since 20 years ago.
Exactly, and remember what happened with Pablo Escobar.
It hasn't worked. At first they started with drugs, now with alcohol, and kids have been recently more involved with alcohol than ever.
Okay, so remember Pablo Escobar. Remember what happened then and what was drugs then. Everything was conflict. He was the worst drug dealer and narcotraficante the country has ever had. People died, and so many people, so many Colombians died because of him and because his business. And he was the one that had all of the money. If drugs were legal back then, and if we make drugs legal, none of that will happen because there's still a lot of people like him. Not as bad at him, but there's still a lot of people like him.
Yes, but there's also a disadvantage for this country, a very big disadvantage. The USA that we have now TLC with them, if we accept drugs or we legalize them, they would immediately retreat that offer. They would cut all connections with us. USA is totally apprehending drugs. They don't like them.
But imagine what would happen if in Colombia, what happened if we legalized drugs happened with what they did when they legalized alcohol and tobacco. Like, it would be a great thing. So maybe those connections wouldn't be lost if it turns out to be a positive thing, if we legalize it.
No, it wouldn't, because the United States certainly wouldn't accept drugs as a business. Many people would think that this would be good, like you
But
said,
we don't want to see it as a business. We actually want to see it as something that will stop it. Like, if we legalize it, we want less violence.
But is that, yes, I understand that point. But people can take advantage of this legalization. Like, for example,
obviously, but those people.
Even though the price of drugs falls very much.
It wouldn't wouldn't be a profitable business.
Like poor people, poor people will start leaving all businesses like drugs, and the government, well, it's already legalized, so they can't do anything, and they will making up a business out of these things, companies.
But people are like poor people are in like a jail because of drugs. Drugs have them taking advantage over their life. People with all that money they gain from drugs are abusing of them. Like poor people are the ones that most suffer because of drugs, and where they live, the violence over there is amazing because of drugs. So what we are trying to do is make the country better and save those people.
So what you're trying to say is that if we legalize drugs, they won't get involved with them.
No, but the mafia there is, like all the black markets, everything that happens, like illegal, that the soldiers and all the police, the Colombian police are going after, and all of them are dying, is because of those people, because of the people that have the guns and that want to protect their drug and everything.
Yes, but we could also prevent this in more collective ways, like more education for poor people. Maybe
exactly. So we educate them and we tell them.
They are no. Maybe if they're educated, they won't have to go to such options as drug trafficking.
But they live in that environment. There's nothing they can do. They have to be enrolled because, first of all, that's how, like, a lot of people get money, and because they're really poor, they go through that need. They need to have money. So that's one of the ways. And second of all, they live like in that environment. Like we live in a higher class, and we don't see what happens in those barrios like Kennedy or those places where there's a lot of drugs.
Yes, of course, but think about it. If drugs are legalized, then more of them would be on the street. Then more people would be able to make a business. Companies would be made out of drugs.
But it would be a non-profitable business.
This would damage the image of Colombia. The image that was already damaged 20 years ago by Pablo Escobar by being like the greatest narco ever.
And that image we have was because of illegal drugs. It was because of the cartels and because of those all of the movies and all of the TV series that are made are because of that, because it was illegal and because it was a black market and everything was hidden and there was people dying and everything. If we legalize that, we could actually stop all of that.
But, well, you have a point where we could stop the violence because the cartels wouldn't need all the guns and all the ammo and all the security they need to keep the drugs safe if they are legalized. But still, this wouldn't keep normal people from making a business out of these things, and I think this is just a bad thing to do, a bad image. It would greatly damage our image as a country.
Okay, but
many countries would reject treaties or having interactions with our country because of this.
Okay, so let's look at Colombia in 10 years, and let's say if it was legal, we could actually see the reduction of violence and the reduction of suffering and deaths because of the drugs. We could actually see poor people, even though they have drugs, we could educate them, and we could make them be something in life without having the need to sell or consume drugs just because they live in that environment and they have that gives them money instead of work.
I don't think that drugs would lead to a better future for this country. Think about addiction.
But drugs are.
We don't know how many people can get addicted to these drugs. Many people could ruin their own lives because of these drugs. Think about the children, the future generations that would be affected by this legalization.
Yes, you're right, but that is also happening right now. That is not like something that would happen also 10 years from now, because drugs are already illegal. What if they were illegal? Maybe there would be more drugs visible and we could see them, but all that violence, like the generations, wouldn't be born in the violence we all live every day and we see in the news.
But still, you're saying that still, by being not legal, the drugs are still reachable to people. But imagine if they were legal, many people ruining their lives, wasting their lives, just by getting addicted to these drugs.
No, because there's also the path of education, and let's say even the people that consume drugs, it's an addiction. They would still consume it. We could stop more people from consuming it, and we could also stop the violence. So it wouldn't be that big of a change, I would say. Like the scale would be.
But we could stop the violence also by educating. So if we educate the people now, if we put schools in many of the poor, poor parts of this, poor regions of Colombia, maybe violence and interactions with drugs will reduce. This will be the same result. The only thing you're saying is that legalized, there will be a change, but I don't see a change. It would be basically the same.
Okay, but look back then.
The only change would be that now, like, if we don't legalize them, there wouldn't be so much addiction, so much people addicted to them, as if we would legalize them.
Look back then. Look at how alcohol was illegal and how it was like a black market and everybody wanted it because it was illegal and because it was something that the government prohibited. And then what did the government had to do? They actually had to legalize it because they didn't find another way of getting out of that chaos they were living in. So maybe with drugs, drugs are obviously a bigger type of, they can harm you more and they can be more dangerous, but they could also stop. If we legalize them, we could see a change, like there was with the tobacco and with the alcohol.
I don't think there would be a change. I think it's better to keep them, to not let them be legalized. This will shut up many interactions with very good countries, such developed countries such as USA. We couldn't have interactions with them if we did this.
But we could also find a treaty if we wanted to.
No, they wouldn't. They wouldn't even talk to us if we legalize drugs.
I think
it's very irrational on this type of topics.
But in the United States, there's a lot of things changing. We never thought they would. Obama is making a lot of changes, and the country in itself, the United States, is changing a lot. They have a more open mind through these types of things. So maybe they could also try to agree that legalizing drugs would stop violence and would stop a lot of deaths.
Well, I don't think it will be any change if we legalize them. If we legalize them, more people would get addicted to them. More people would get access to them. This would end up harming the future generations, our most capable members. Even though it can it can reach out to those assumptions, and I think it would just be better because if we do not legalize them, we can still have the results. We would have to enforce more education, and we would have to be more careful.
Enforcing education is a really important thing.
Yeah,
and we have to think about how the children and the future generations will be affected. I think that's the main thing we have to look at when we think about this topic.
Yes. Well, I think future generations wouldn't be as affected to it if we didn't legalize them. Well, we could still stop the violence and the interactions with drugs by educating them. There's no difference if we legalize them. The violence would stop. The violence wouldn't stop.
If we legalize it.
No, I don't think that the violence would stop because...
What about all the mafia that's behind it?
Nowadays, there isn't cartels as big
okay,
as
so we can...
cartels in the years of Pablo Escobar. I don't think that it would be possible.
We can agree to disagree, and when we see a change, let's say if they tried to legalize it somewhere, we can see where that takes it. Or if we still keep it illegal but things change and go better, we could talk about it.
We'll just have to agree to disagree.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thank you.